All right, my friends, welcome back to another episode of the Build Show podcast. Guys, we got a fantastic podcast, maybe the best one of the season lined up for you right now. We're about to talk to two economists that really have a heartbeat on the industry, and we're going to ask them some questions. For instance, all this crazy tariff talk, it feels like if you publish something 2 weeks later, it's out of date. So we're going to really try to get the most up-to-date information on tariffs. We're also going to be talking about, for you as builders and remodelers, is there an options out there for savings on materials? And then also some general economy from these guys, like what's happening in the residential remodel and new build industry. Kind of asking these economists, what's the crystal ball look like? Are we going to see home starts for remodels and new builds go up, down, flat? What should we expect next year? I'm super, super excited. These are two really smart guys from this company called Zonda, which you may or may not know. You probably know the brand like Builder Magazine, Architect Magazine, JLC that I've been reading for 20 years now. Those are a couple of the brands that you might know, but you don't know that Zonda has a whole other side of their business that does, frankly, nothing but research and insights for builders. So we're going to ask these two guys a little bit about their company, and we're also going to give you some resources beyond the podcast from this fabulous company called Zonda. So that being said, from the Austin, Texas Rice and Grow Build Studios, let's get going. Okay, guys, before we jump in with our guest today talking about tariffs and the future of the building industry, let me say a big thanks to our two podcast sponsors. First off, Huber Engineered Woods. You've heard me talk about these guys a lot. They're the OG Build Show sponsor, but something you may not know is that they have a fabulous tech team and an incredible website with lots of resources. Just from a social media standpoint, if you go to Instagram and look up Huber Wood, they are connecting with people on a hourly basis. And my understanding is people have even DM'd them with questions and they get back really, really quickly. They've done a great job over the last 4 or 5 years now they've been on Instagram. But also make sure you go check out their website. There's a lot of really good tech tips, great resources. You can get Spanish install directions, all that good stuff on their website. So big thanks to Huber, the OG sponsor of the Build Show. And another sponsor I want to say thanks to, it's actually a new Build Show sponsor, Medea. You may not recognize the name, but they're actually one of the world's largest producer of major appliances. And they're really an emerging brand that you need to be aware of when it comes to home heating and cooling and hot water. Medea, I had about an hour-long call with these guys last week, kind of talking about product. I got to tell you, they're very contractor forward. They seem to be very focused on the installer and meeting their needs of the HVAC pro. For instance, they, in the past year, have opened 12 showrooms and training centers in the U.S. alone. So they're really expanding their U.S. footprint. And their R&D center is based in Louisville, Kentucky. And that's where they're basically making equipment or designing equipment that's going to be for use here in the U.S. Very impressive company with some really interesting products. And as a side note, they're involved with some interesting initiatives. For instance, the DOE Cold Climate Heat Pump Technology Challenge, where their all climate heat pump tested an impressive 118% of rated capacity at minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit. They really have gone big in electrification. I mean, they're basically a heat pump manufacturer. And so some of their equipment is super interesting. I saw them at the IBS show and they've got some really neat stuff out there. So anyways, go check out Medea, M-I-D-E-A. If you just Google that name, you'll get to their US website. All right, guys, let me introduce you to our podcast guests. I've got on screen with me here on this Zoom call, I've got Matt and Todd. Matt and Todd, would you guys give me kind of a quick background on who you are? And also maybe you could give me, Todd, a bit of an understanding, like who is Zonda?
Yeah, so we're extremely curious, I think, just by nature. So we like good questions, and unfortunately, in the environment we're in right now, there keeps getting more questions than we can possibly solve. I have been around the housing space for about 20 years, always in the kind of forecasting and analysis role. So for years ago, I was in the economics group. I led North American economics for a company called Kohler Company, the big kitchen and bath company. Was there through the financial crisis, spent some time in banking before that. Was at another research firm for about another 7 years. And recently, we're building out what we think is one of the most interesting intelligence platforms around housing at Zonda. Think of all the things that you wish you could measure that would just make our life easier. That's what Zonda's in the business of gathering. So, roughly 1,000 people in the company only focused on gathering information around housing in North America.
Holy cow. And then all those brands that I mentioned, those magazines that I've been connecting with for years, that's underneath the Zonda umbrella, right? Those are all owned by Zonda.
Yeah, we value the insights from that JLC crowd, builder crowd, just tremendously. They tend to see all the things that get missed in the underlying statistics. So all those publications, it helps us just get a great wealth of continual knowledge that we keep taking in, and we value everyone on this call too, the things that they're learning. If you hear me say something that you disagree, please let us know, because we need to know.
All right. Sounds good, Todd. Hey, Matt, give us a quick background on you. I know you as an economist, but what does that mean and what's your background?
Yeah, you're giving me too much credit there, Matt. I'm definitely not smart enough to be an economist. I'm actually not. I've actually spent my career as an operating guy in the industry. I worked in manufacturing distribution for about 20 years of building products. We were a company that started up here in the Northeast, where I am, expanded nationally, and then we also went through several mergers and acquisitions on both sides of the deal. So I really earned some good battle scars over that time. And I joined Todd's team, the building product advisory team at Zonda. Coming up on 3 years ago now. And so it's been fun, and Todd and I and the rest of our team have very different backgrounds. We've all been in the space for a long time, but it's been fun just kind of offering our experience to help all the the builders and contractors who, and even investor community who kind of leverage the information that we gather. So we're excited to be here with you today.
I'm really glad you guys could be here. Let's lead off right from the get-go with, I know, something that's been top of mind for everybody. And this changes depending on the news day or what's happening in the White House. But what do builders and remodelers, general contractors need to know today about tariffs? What can you guys tell us that's kind of up to date? And we're by the way, we're filming this this podcast or videoing this podcast at the end of April. So this could very well change depending on when you listen to this. But as of today, what can you guys give in terms of advice and understanding of what's happening on the tariff side?
Buckle up. So every time we have a research sequence, then usually the third month in our quarter, we publish a products issue. And every time we get to the products issue, a new tariff comes out. And so I'm worried about this next round. Quick thumbnail is we think that we potentially are looking at price increases in the ballpark of about 9% for the industry. Not all of that is from the tariff. We would have had some price increases without that, but you get this issue of even companies that don't think they have any imports at all usually still have some imported components or raw materials or commodities. It's really hard to get entirely removed from that. So you should be thinking about higher cost at some point. If you're not seeing it right now, you will see it in the future. And the time that it takes for this to kind of reverberate through the product portfolio and the economy can be quite some time, a year, 18 months, maybe longer. So it's really tricky to navigate. We say buckle up and we're just getting started.
Yeah, I could totally see that, Todd. As a kind of a research deck, my team gave me a bunch of reports from you guys that have been published over a couple months period, really. And I read some reports that you guys published that were from December and then kind of January, February. And it's funny, December was only a few months away, and it feels like that report was written a year or two ago, just in terms of the uncertainty we were facing. And now even in some respects, some certainty and some uncertainty still. But one interesting thing about the report that I read, Todd, that I want to ask you about, because I know your team really focuses on building products. there was a section in there that was brand related, and it said, okay, like in the window and door or the plumbing industry or whatever, here's some brands that if we see tariffs and price increases, these brands will do better and could actually see an increased market share. And here's some brands that could do less well. And as an example, you mentioned you work for Kohler. I'm a big Kohler fan. I've got a whole house with a Kohler going on right now. It said actually in a rising price market, Kohler may not do as well. They may not see an increase in their market share, but another brand like Moen maybe would. Help us to understand what that means.
Yeah, I'll start and then kick it over to Matt. One of the things that we spend a lot of time looking at is, we have observational data, which means that when someone's, say, configuring their home and putting products in their home and choosing, say, their faucets, we can compare what happens when mortgage rates go up and they get hit with more payments, or, in this case, maybe tariffs go up and they get hit with the higher cost. And we basically did an analysis at when consumers only have so many dollars. They want to upgrade everything in their home, but they know they can't. So what that report brought out was that there are certain brands that really capture a lot more sales when consumers are pinched and the rubber meets the road. And so we see a lot of private label brands gain share because they tend to be lower cost. In the current environment, though, those are the brands that are going to have the highest price hikes because they have the most direct tariffs. So it's like we're taking the product snow globe and shaking it all up, and we think we're going to see quite a bit of like shuffling around in terms of market share of winners and losers. Matt has some really good thoughts around even how the channels are changing that too. But it's exciting times.
Let's
Sure.
What's your thoughts on that, Matt? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing that we find about product brands in our industry, Matt, is that a lot of times when the economy is, really strong or maybe struggling the way it is a little bit now, there's a reaction among pros to either, we'll talk about kind of current time to, hey, let me sort of notch down my brands a little bit where I can and kind of save some money, almost like a peanut butter approach. And we've dug into it a lot. We're analyst geeks over here in this practice, and we've dug into it a lot. And what we found is that it's safe to cut back in some product categories and not others, which is really interesting, but it makes sense. If you think about us all as consumers outside work, there's some things we're willing to compromise brands on. There's some things we're not. It might be food, it might be clothing, it might be, whatever. And I'll give you some examples, Matt. Some of the categories we found that it's safe to, sort of go the more private label or just, sort of less expensive route, manufacturer that's not, maybe spending on their brand. Things that are fairly obvious, those commodity products like wallboard, molding, trim wood, waterproofing, insulation, stuff that most homeowners, unless you've got a engineer client aren't going to know the brand anyway.
Sure.
Some of the other ones though that might be more useful for for your group here is garage doors, portable generators. Yes, generators have some major brands in there. What we've learned though is that on the pro side and in the consumer side, they're very fungible. They're very switchable without people thinking there's going to be a you've taken cost out of my build. Couple others that might be even a little more controversial are things like kitchen cabinets and countertops. We found that as long as you give the the beautiful fit and finish that people require, the colors people require, they're virtually never branded products, right? There's no brand stamp in the middle of your countertop, and so you can actually, and this isn't us sitting around thinking about it. This was actually some fairly deep analysis that went into this. You can change those things out a lot. And as you know, as a builder, with some of those kitchen products, you can save considerably. So, without just taking our word for it, we definitely encourage builders, if you're feeling, and contractors, if you're feeling the margin pinch right now, really talk to your homeowner clients and get a feel for what brands they really are noticing that you're putting in versus the ones you might have spent money on that, that not that it was money left on the table, but they might not have noticed. And even ask your realtors. We find they have a really good finger on what homeowners are looking for when they walk into a home. So I guess, our point would be that you can save on brands. The key is to just know which categories are more sensitive than others, like the ones we mentioned there.
So in other
I'll
words,
share this.
Oh, sorry, Todd, go ahead.
No, just one way that I think is not talked about in the industry, but probably should be. And Matt, you just said a really interesting sentence that you were doing a house and the whole house was Kohler. Mm-hmm. I think there's kind of two universes that split that we see happen in the data. There's the type of home buyers, and we see this with consumers in general, where the basket, like if you think about the upgrades in the home, they put a Kohler faucet. We're just picking on them because they're the name at hand here, but sure. They'll also kind of do the whole suite. They'll do the vanity, and they'll do the toilet, and they'll do the shower, and they all want it to tie. That's a special type of homeowner and a special type of home buyer that you have to look at the whole upgrade bundle. So how we typically will model this out on our end is we'll look at the brand substitution, and then we try to find the ones that have the most kind of pull through of the overall bundle. There are some categories where there's no bundle, and it's just the product itself. And so those tend to be very different types of homeowners. So if you hear a homeowner talking about it's almost like the green egg thing of the grill, right? Where no one just buys the green egg. They buy like 50 different accessories. Mm-hmm. They have to have everything that matches. There's a homeowner equivalent for some products in the home, but it's not all homeowners. Some owners just buy like the cheap grill, which is fine, but you know them when you see them.
Yeah. It's another kind of interesting trend that I got from your reports, Matt and Todd, was that it felt to me like your report was saying that America's getting older, it kind of in general. And I hear this a lot talked about, we have this baby issue. We're not producing enough babies in America to replace us. So we've got an older generation. We have all these older tradesmen retiring, but we also have older Americans that are frankly wealthier. So if you're just using my own example, I'm 50, I'm about to turn 53. If I'm building or remodeling a house, I'm in a much better position financially probably than if I'm 33. So I may go, I really want a house full of Kohler. I really want these appliances and I'm willing to pay for them. So I may be less price sensitive to a $40,000 appliance package for a house full of appliances that maybe is $50,000 now. And I'm going to be very brand specific with whatever brands I want, and not go, oh, that's a alternative brand X made in China or home label, or what's the word you use, Matt? I forget what you said. The
private label.
Private label. I'm going to be like, no, I don't want the private label.
Store brand.
That's right. I want the Kohler faucet or the Kohler toilet or whatever brand I'm excited about, and I'm willing to pay for that because I've got the money to pay for it. Tell me what you think the trends are in terms of kind of new construction and remodeling when it comes to that kind of aging population that maybe has a little bit more money to spend.
Yeah, the aging, we'll call it wealthier population than say 20 years ago, is the sole part of the market that's been keeping the housing market afloat for the last 24 months, and it's a game changer. For all of the professionals that are kind of in the market right now. To your point about what's happening, we have a point where homeowners are sitting on more home equity than they've ever had in not just the history of the data, but in the history of like measured economic activity in the world, and it's concentrated in the U.S. and it's concentrated among these older homeowners. They move about half as often as they used to, 20 years ago, which means that not only are there fewer homes to be found, but when you put products in your home, they tend to be the products because you're moving half as often. You're living there at least twice as long. So we see nicer materials in general. Think composite decking, composite windows. That's a different type of home buyer than maybe a first-time buyer, partly because the first-time buyer knows they're a first-time buyer and are going to move again. And so one of the consequences of this demographic issue that you mentioned is that we've seen a sea change in terms of the value of pro builders and pro contractors. So Home Depot, just as an example, in their investor relations made a pivot about 2 years ago where they said now their new focus is on something called the complex pro, which basically means a pro that has to coordinate different parts of the home. That was never the type of pro that typically they would have gone after before or would have gone after. The reason that that's so attractive is because you've got a shortage of contractors that is going to emerge. We've done some math on this. We think if you think of how tight things were in 2021 and 2022, unless something surprises us by 2030, for every new job, there will be about 15% fewer pro contractors between now and then. And we have more jobs. We have a whole backlog of deferred home improvement activity that's going to happen. So the influence of the people on this call is only going to go up, which is nice to be able to relate. It also means that things get more complicated. Some people just won't have pros, or if they do have pros, they won't be able to find the quality of the pro that they wish they could.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately.
And Todd, you just
go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
No, after you, Matt.
I was going to say that by people on this call, Todd, you mean the listeners on the podcast. This is a pro podcast, right? We're not talking to DIYers here. Maybe there's someone listening who is, but if you're my builder, remodeler, general contractor friends, your stock is only going up because you are more and more valuable as there's less of us available. And frankly, if I look at the trends from your decks that I've been reading over the last couple months, it looks to me like we might be flat-ish or maybe even see some slight increases in 2025. But based on all the data out there, 26, 27, 28, it's going to continue to go up. There's plenty of work in the future for us. What were you going to say, Matt?
Yeah, I think similar to, so Todd was just talking about, older Americans and, the tendency to use contractors. We find the same with wealthier Americans, sort of that top 20%. And, when you combine that with all of that home equity kind of dry powder sitting there, Todd's used an interesting analogy of like a beach ball underwater, that once it gets to the point that it's about to come up, it's not gently floating to the top, it's popping out, right? And so we think when obviously tariffs subside, the economy is calmer in general, we do see a significant pop, to your point, Matt, that, double-digit increases post 2025.
Talk about that just for a second, because I feel like this is going to, podcast listeners will listen in 3 weeks. I should tell them that we're about to drop a new forecast. Realistically, with what's happening, in mortgage markets and what's happening in the housing market, we probably are looking at a scenario where new home construction is down at least mid-single digits this year. And home improvement spending down as well, and maybe we're coming into a recession. Realistically, by Q3, Q4 this year, we don't know. It's hard to work through these things. What I want to emphasize though is like we've seen how this plays out before. We saw this in the the early 1980s when we had a double dip recession. The last time the Fed was fighting inflation, and the amount of home improvement activity that happened then, and the amount of moves we've never seen ever in the history before or since. Think of like growing 30% year on year on year. This is when Home Depot was founded. That's the precedent. So we have more homes now. We have fewer workers per job when that inevitably happens. And, there's some really interesting data from the New York Fed that we look at pretty closely that ask people, this is like one of those like perception questions. How long are you planning on staying in your home? When do you think you're moving? And did you know that the percentage of people that are under 50 years old that are telling us that they're planning on being in their home less than 2 years, that's 2x higher than where it was in 2021. So you have kind of this festering discontent and discomfort with the home that they're in. Eventually, they have to either move, or they have to remodel, or they're stuck with the home they hate. And so we think these things tend to fester. It's just a question of when they have the right kind of financial wherewithal to go pull the trigger. And as you alluded to, that there will be fewer high quality pro to bid on those jobs. The people on this call will be the ones whose stock goes up at that point.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. As a follow-up to that, Todd, I want to ask you another question, because we were talking about that kind of older, aging Americans. How does that impact remodeling in terms of complexity, better materials, and cost/price elasticity? That's kind of a broad question, but how do you see that playing out?
Yeah. So we know a couple things. Right now, if there's a whole sea of red, horrific indicators kind of in the financial press and in the housing press. We just saw a new really bad existing home print come out today. The one green light indicator that you'll find in the whole board is that cash out home equity extraction is growing. It's growing. It's up like 30% year over year. Now off of a really, really low base. It's a 30-year low. But if we take those dollars and we follow those dollars and we see, kind of what that does to remodeling, this is that same group of homeowners that have the most equity, right, that are sitting on their home. We know that it causes the complexity of the job to go between 4x and 7x higher. So what that means is, you would have just done your floors. Now you do your floors and your kitchen and your deck, right? You just get the overall amount of candy bar that a homeowner bites off when that happens tends to be much larger. So we think that's kind of the nugget. If you think about the pull forward that happened post-COVID, none of it was that. It was more of these backyard projects, small one-off projects, some new construction, but our sense is what got deferred, in part because you couldn't find the appliances you wanted to. There was a shortage of products for all the things you really wanted to do, especially in the luxury end. We think this luxury, complex job, that will be the first part of the market to rebound. And then 6 months to 8 months later, that's when we maybe see the other part of the market. We saw the same thing happen in 2009, 2010 too. Luxury recovered first. So, that is where the deferrals happen the most, and also where there happens to be the most wealth.
Makes a lot of sense for sure. Another kind of side question to that, in your reports that I read, there's a lot of talk about technology adoption for the pro contractor, and I'm curious how you guys see that impacting from a supply side in terms of, let's say, e-commerce buys or maybe even direct from manufacturer buys. Would you guys talk about that for a minute?
I'll let Matt take this one. This is his
Shall I? Oh,
this is Matt's
my favorite. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, literally. We're seeing massive shifting of sales channels by pro builders and contractors right now. And I think for obvious reasons, we measure things like quote acceptance rates, traffic, backlogs, sort of all these different things with subscribers of those magazines that you talked about earlier. We have several million of them that we're polling kind of all the time. And, what we're hearing, and, maybe some folks on this call are unfortunately living, is that a lot of folks are getting squeezed right now, and ultimately their margins are tighter. They can't really go out and raise prices because it's a competitive world, right? Unless all their competitors are, they're the high price out there. And so we're seeing more focus on cost than ever when it comes to the bill. And they also can't really cut labor rates right now in an environment where labor is kind of tougher to get than ever in a lot of regions of the country. And so what they're trying to save is building product costs, Matt. And so you can do that in two ways, right? You can shop different places or you can buy different products. We talked a little bit about the products and brands earlier. Well, they're doing it with channels in a big way too. And the ones that you mentioned, online, especially online that don't have a brick and mortar presence. And I know someone's going to spit out their Coke right now, but Amazon is growing absolute leaps and bounds in building products. Wow. They're doing it quietly, but absolutely. And then the next channel, which will be more, I think close to home, is that direct from manufacturers, mostly through their websites. Those are the two fastest growing channels. And we're not researching homeowners at all for that, purely among pro contractors and builders. And to be fair, I think contractors are going to more channels than builders. Their needs are a little more basic usually. Mm-hmm. But we're seeing huge increases. But, and we did a deep dive on Amazon recently. We'll probably throw out a post sometime soon on the faucet category. And it had some of the things were obvious. They have 10 times the number of faucets than Home Depot online, than HomeDepot.com. Over 40,000 available right now, just nuts. And a lot of really cheap ones, but then also a lot of really expensive ones you can't get anywhere but kitchen and bath dealers. So they're not just going after these, sort of, quote unquote, no name products from China. They're going after, Neptune Brass and Waterworks, some really high end $5,000-$10,000 faucets you can get on Amazon. That's so, they're penetrating categories in a big way, but You can go deeper with technology, though. We also see folks like The Depot, frankly, doing a lot better on their website and sort of with their digital offerings. And I think both Todd and my point of view is that, as folks like me age out over the next several years, and you've got 20 and 30-year-old, some 30 somethings, kind of dominating job sites over that period. They grew up online. They're that digital native that marketers talk about. And we're already starting to see that, like, having a great website and a good buying experience isn't really a huge differentiator anymore. Frankly, it puts some of the very traditional dealers, and we're having so much fun. We won't name names on there, but some of, like, the kind of the pro wholesalers, some have been involved in some acquisitions lately, like, that really need to catch up on sort of the digital sophistication side, because it's very foreseeable that even a commercial roofer in 5 years is going to say, "Hey, I need this many rolls of EPDM now, like, and I need it." And I need it, delivered in 3 hours. Yeah, I don't want to call a rep from my pro dealer and have them bring me donuts and talk about it. Like, it just has to happen, like the rest of their lives are. So we think digital sort of sophistication is becoming really table stakes. Maybe not today, but in the next several years. I'm sorry, Todd, you were going to add something.
No, just on that point, like, maybe I'll just tell a story here that maybe some of I think, Matt, maybe you'll be able to relate to this too. It's not lost on me or us that if we look at pre-COVID and where we are right now, the amount of dollars that the share of e-commerce that's capturing building products and materials is roughly the same as where we were, say, from 2004 in music. Like, and if we look at other industries to like 2007, I remember in 2007, this is when I worked at Kohler. There was a morning when I walked out to my car. This is true. I walked out to my car. And do you remember those CD binders that we used to all have, like, on our passenger?
Totally.
I had a CD binder because, I had a child of the 90s and loved these things. And
because you had a subscription to that service that you get like 12 CDs for a penny.
They sucked you in. They sucked you in.
I can't think of it.
Columbia House.
Columbia House.
That's it.
It was only a penny. But what happened in 2007, I'll always remember this. It was like a turning point. Someone broke into my car before I was going to Kohler. And, the cars, the gloves all torn apart and the doors open. And they had clearly taken my CD binder and gone through every page, like flipped through it and stole nothing. And I felt sad. I'm like, this is good music. You don't know. But it was a turning point that was no longer the medium. And, that I was still learning at that point, that this was the shift. But that was 2007. So, from pre-COVID to where we are right now, the same amount of penetration has shifted for e-commerce and building products.
Wow.
So these things tend to be permanent. They tend to be sticky. And if we pull the thread on in other industries, like what that's done, go look at the distribution of, like, in the 90s, of who were the most purchased albums, versus, like, right now, Taylor Swift dominates all of it right now. There were superstars in the 90s, but they didn't capture as much of the share. So, part of our hypothesis is that you're going to run into a situation where these superstar brands, when you can choose from 30,000 different faucets, the one faucet that has the top mind share will just gain far more dollars than it would have if we were in 2005. It's a shift that's happening right now. It's really interesting times.
I think
you can't walk down the aisle. You can't walk down the aisle or the category in these web offerings. I mean, I challenge anyone who's gotten to number 30, 40,000 on Amazon. You mentioned COVID earlier, and there are some, at least in my mind, there are some similarities to the sort of just the very uncertain times you talked about earlier, Matt, that, behaviors change a little bit. And, and if anything good for our industry came out of COVID, in my mind, is that innovation actually jumped forward a lot. Like, a lot of suppliers who said, I'm never going to sell online, suddenly had builders and contractors who said, I can't come in, my wife's sick, I can't get my kids sick, like, figure it out. And a lot of them finally said, okay, it's time to fish or cut bait, I guess, and do it. And, and we would encourage, we're seeing a lot of sales channels just fighting so hard for your pros business right now, for your listeners' business. We would definitely encourage folks to stop into that channel online or in the store that maybe they've ignored, they heard wasn't very good, because they're just fighting so hard for business. Some have gone very long on inventory and they're going to be dropping. Some are, some are in credit trouble, and they're kind of doing whatever they can to really get business right now. It's the time to innovate. And if things slow down a little bit, hey, go online, see if you can find some of these products. You might be pleasantly surprised. What I thought you were going to say, Todd, earlier is one of the things we saw in COVID is that some pros told us they went to the depot because nobody else had product, and they went back to their other channels afterwards. But now they always check the depot prices. Like now it was a good enough experience.
Fascinating. It's so interesting. As an old guy builder that I am now, I remember years ago when clients were like, "Oh, I want to source all my plumbing through these online places that I can get them cheaper." And me and my builder colleagues that were the old guys were like, "No, don't do that. That'd be terrible. Like, we got to buy it from our local supply house, because if there's a problem, I can call Mike up and get Mike to bring me the part I need or whatever." And I honestly still think that way. Like when you first said an Amazon faucet, I threw up in my mouth a little bit. Like, oh, that is, if I had a client hand me a box from Amazon with a faucet, I would absolutely, it's horrible. The thought makes my skin crawl. Like, please don't order your freaking faucet from Amazon. Will that change in a few years? You know why it'll change? Because my son at some point has told me he wants to take over my business. And my son, who's in high school now, doesn't know how to do anything without ChatGPT. There's an Amazon package every night that he's ordered something from. He doesn't have this preconceived notion that that's going to be a problem, because I had a problem once 5 years ago. So as we get more and more contractors retiring, which is happening very soon and into the foreseeable future, everybody who's my son's age will absolutely order from an online supplier. And I can tell you that the brick and mortar guys, or the big guys, know that. And I hope that these guys don't mind me using the example, but like Builders First Source is a big supporter of the Build Show. They've gone big. They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on their online platform so that a builder can literally order an entire lumber package with a click of a button without talking to anybody. And do I want to do that? No, but I guarantee you my 32-year-old project manager who has a construction management degree will absolutely do that all day long. And so they're smart enough to realize, oh, the Mats are going to retire pretty soon, and these guys are absolutely going to take over. So they've invested hugely in that so that they can be competitive against those forces.
You're so right.
Take that and just add one more lump of sugar on that.
Yeah, please.
Well, I think about this a lot. So, we started out with our discussion around tariffs. Dear Lord, what's going to happen? Like, it's changing in 15-minute increments, just it feels like.
Totally.
And when you think about, like, one of the questions that we heard a lot during COVID was, who has the best prices? Prices are lumber's going, through the roof. We've never seen numbers like this. There was a perception that the most tech-forward companies, without putting names out there, we're also the fastest in terms of like delivering the best price to the pros. And so, there's an argument to be made that this is the year 2025, 2026, like as these like pricing repercussions go through, that the chances of finding like far better availability, far better prices for like literally the same product, but on an e-commerce platform, and simply because one of them has just a different amount of data and analysis that's behind it, you'll just see more of that. So we think that this could be putting a little bit more fuel on the fire in terms of like the pace of the underlying change. I'm with you. There's reasons that the pro desk and the high quality pro interaction that you're used to having exists because they have the best products and they take care of you far better than they have in the past. But I'll tell you what I think of too. One more. So some of your listeners might know that I'm from originally Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is incidentally having the draft this week. There is a little known lumber yard in Green Bay that I think about all the time. That it's like if you know the names, the guys who like Fez Tool, the guys who like saw stop, the guys who like there's kind of that breed of tool buyer, right?
I know
But
exactly what you
it turns
mean.
out it's a little, we know they started out as a lumber company,
Yep.
but I think they're one of the nation's number one distributors of fest tool and saw stop products, all online.
Wow.
All online. And so I just keep thinking like, boy, what we're seeing is a fairly small operation that gets hyper specialized, just be able to scale a lot far. Like whatever they're doing right. So yeah, I wonder if we see more of that, coming out of this tariff, kerfuffle over the next few years.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I think what you talked about was sort of that ideal scenario, Matt, that the best ones are going toward to be able to serve, be able to serve builders and contractors the way they want to be served. The ones who want to come in and spread out a plan and find someone who can do a takeoff and answer some, good expert questions, or just, I leave my shopping list on my account online. I use the same, whatever roofing underlayment every time. I just want it there. I don't need to have a conversation about it. And we follow the acquisitions of the industry very closely and are very interested. We thought the Depot's acquisition of SRS was pretty brilliant at the time and published a lot on it. And I think they're feeling pretty happy they have them at this point from the recent investor calls.
Who is
I think the
SRS?
QXO of Beacon.
Who is SRS, Matt? I don't know that name.
Okay, great question. Thank you. They're a roofing distributor, massive roll up they bought literally hundreds of roofing, small, independent, mom and pop, all the little ones. Gotcha. They went around the country and bought them over many years, and then the Depot did an $18 billion acquisition. It's one of the biggest acquisitions ever. It was the biggest in our industry ever. And then recently, as you probably know, QXO, Brad Jacobs bought Beacon. And I think when we talk about that digital sophistication, part of it is the buying experience and the website and all of that. But then part of it is what you just talked about, Todd. Part of it is inventory management. So, hey, if Matt or any builder says, you know what, I need him at this job site tomorrow, they look and say, okay, I've got 50 different delivery points around there, and I've got all these moving trucks. Who's going to get it to them? And stuff you never even see other than it got there on time and the product was pristine. And so, I think we're going to see more and more. Obviously, folks like Builders First Source that you mentioned, Matt, very smart group. They rolled up a ton of smaller lumber yards. We think there's going to be, the sales channel side, I think, still has some more meat on that bone. And if places like Beacon and SRS, two of the larger players, I think there's going to be more and more of that, especially some of the real specific ones. Go ahead, Todd.
Let me touch that just for a second, because we talk to a lot of investors, and I don't know that they fully have their heads wrapped around this. But look, so part of what's happening right now, think of like Home Depot went after roofing, Beacon went after roofing. I'm sorry, QXO went after roofing. But now's a wild time to be getting into the roofing acquisition business, because we're at a little bit of like of an anomaly where do you remember this shift that happened in asphalt shingles 25 years ago from strips, to laminates, and then now they're kind of a different breed of laminate than they used to be. And so there was this deferred wave of re-roofs that didn't happen in 2015. It didn't happen in 2016. That kind of all pushed to right now. And so it's elevated way beyond, like 30, 40% beyond what it normally should have been, because you have like this one-time, call it a freak re-roof thing, as well as all those homes built in the early 2000s were lapping.
Yep.
That's going to go back down to 2018 levels.
Yeah.
7 years from now. Like between now and then, we can draw the line, which means that Home Depot and QXO, they've got to go into other categories. Mm-hmm. They've got to expand. So this is a roofing conversation today. It is a much broader conversation tomorrow, because they're not going to lose revenue. They're not going to lose share. So yeah, I mean, we're really starting to see just kind of the beginning of the pivot, we think.
Man, so good, guys. I hate to keep going. I want to be respectful of your time. But Matt, or Todd specifically, tell us how builders, remodelers, GCs can connect with Zonda and get some of that data that I got to prep for this meeting, because you guys are publishing all kinds of stuff and a good portion of that's free, right?
we don't like to say that it's free. Our best stuff is not free, but we do have a lot of free things that are out there.
Well,
of course.
tell us how to get the not free stuff too.
ZondaHome.com.
Okay.
ZondaHome.com is the website. You can go there and get all sorts of information. There's webinars. Most of the backdrop that we just talked through, we have even more on different topics. We just did a whole one on tariffs and mortgage rates, and there's all sorts of free material there. If you've got a housing data question or insight question, we have the most granular data in the industry. We have published research that we try to have be the most kind of thoughtful coverage of all of that. There's someone in our company that has an answer. So start in the free section and then reach out and keep digging until you find answers. But we're happy to help.
Yeah, my understanding.
And Matt, I've noticed with some of your other webinars, we'll give you our contact info. I noticed when you put them up on YouTube and whatnot, and they can always come to us. If it's us, great. If not, it's a big company. We'll get you to the right folks.
Fabulous, Matt. And just as a quick sales pitch for Zonda, my understanding is that you work with a lot of builders who are typically bigger than me. I only do 6 or 7, usually very custom for a specific buyer. But a lot of builders that are doing, let's say, 50 or 500 homes a year are trying to figure out, hey, where's the trends in my specific town in the middle of somewhere in America? And they're using your company to go, hey, where are the trends here? Where should I be looking at dirt in 5 years? What's the population look like? They're getting really granular data from you guys to try and really plan their businesses. And again, this is maybe not the 5-person shop, but when you get to that semi-custom builder, production builder, they're using you guys a ton and really getting great data. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, we are the platform that all of the large builders use to track their market share and use their planning. And it's just one of these things that is prohibitively expensive to do at scale on your own. You pay a lot of money in different ways, and we use technology to solve that problem. So yeah, absolutely, we this is all we do is spend our time measuring the space.
Awesome. So
and not Todd and I personally, but we also do tons of land studies at Zonda. Right, you have land, you're looking for land that might be relevant to some of the maybe smaller, medium size potential clients.
That's right. So ZondaHome.com is really where folks should start with. Sounds like.
Start there, and you can always reach out to anyone on our team too, and we'll try to get you pointed in the right direction. But we're just trying to keep up with what's changing in the industry so much that we kind of perceive that we're stronger together, including with the builders and the pros that are listening than on our own, because we navigate this better together than alone.
Yeah, and as a side note, I've heard Allie Wolf on your team. I don't know if she's on your exact team, but I've heard her called like chief economist. I don't know if that's her exact title, but I've heard her give a housing forecast report several times that BFS, I think, has sponsored. And man, every time I hear her, I'm screenshotting, I'm recording, I'm feverishly taking notes. She's fabulous to listen to. So when you hear the name Zonda, there's a lot of different parts to the company. But if you see somebody talking about things with the title from Zonda, you should absolutely tune in for my podcast friends out there. Guys, I really appreciate the time. We'll put a link to these guys' specific contact information if you need some help for them. And again, ZondaHome.com. That being said, guys, appreciate you tuning in to the Build Show podcast. This is our time to get together on a weekly basis, bring some experts on, give you some good information to guide your businesses. And I'm super thankful for Matt and Todd to take some time out from their busy day to give us some insights. With that being said, guys, follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on the Build Show podcast.